all-inclusive things. And
Go.
oh, not yet. Just real quick. I just want to say I haven't given a PowerPoint presentation in literally 10 years. So
You're gonna be great.
okay. Oh right, this is okay.
You have time.
Yeah,
Okay,
15
well, let's
seconds.
start the next
20,
one.
50
But,
seconds,
okay,
huh?
all right. So sexual pleasure is taboo. We don't usually talk about it, even with our closest friends. We culturally associate it with things like frivolousness, selfishness, shame, embarrassment, and why? Like, is that, like, what good is that doing? It's the most adult topic that there is, but we don't deal with it like adults. Like we as adults deal with other things that we value and want to make better. Pleasure, I'm here to say, is actually really good. Not only does it feel good by definition, but it also is good for us, as in wholesome. So I work for a research startup that partners with the Kinsey Institute and IU School of Medicine. And we do original research on sexual pleasure. It has been on women, and we're branching out to men now too. And we publish scientific papers, and we also produce a website that's educational so that people can put the latest research findings into practice in their own lives. And our research partners recently did a efficacy study of that website. So they took 1,000 people who'd never been to the site before, and they gave them a survey. And then after a month of using the techniques on the site, they gave them a survey again. And they found that, yes, people's pleasure increased. They felt, they had more orgasms, they had more pleasurable sex, but they also had experienced pleasure in ways that felt new to them physically they had never had before. And it's not rocket science, it's just new ways of touching. It's not even new, because the information came from people who aren't talking about it with each other. There was another finding that I think is really surprising. In that survey, they also included a commonly used scale that's used to assess life thriving, general self-efficacy. And so it included questions like, I generally feel like people in my community respect me. I think I'm a good person. I feel comfortable speaking up at work and sharing my ideas. And people's numbers on those questions moved as well. And the researchers determined that that move was mediated by the increased pleasure. So pleasure feels good and is good for us, makes us feel better about ourselves and our own lives. However, most people have one or two techniques when they masturbate that they use that really work for them. Usually it's something they discovered when they were younger and exploring. And then over time they perfect them. Kind of like a recipe. You might know someone who has like one or two dishes that they're really good at and they make over and over. But it turns out there are as many types of pleasure as there are types of food. In our last minute here, I'm going to share with you one of the topics from our site, which is broadening. It's really simple. It's the idea of whatever is contacting the clit or the vulva, instead of being a point source, being a more broad surface area, diffuse source of stimulation. And 87% of women like this kind of stimulation. Usually, all of those 87% like it, especially in the beginning, and for about half of them, it's enough to achieve orgasm. They like it that much. And here are some ways to do it. Fingertip becomes pads of fingers, tip of the penis or dildo becomes shaft, tip of the tongue becomes flat of the tongue, and so on. It's something everyone could try tonight. And one subtype of broadening is grinding. and it's basically the same idea, but about half of women do this, and they do it against soft furniture or things like rolled up towels. And even though about half of women do it, 80% of them have never told a soul that they do it. And we asked them why not, and they said, because I thought it was just my own weird thing. So we're all living in isolation when it comes to our pleasure, and that's really too bad because we have a lot to learn from each other and a lot to gain by learning more about it. Yes.
Is it just weird coincidence that, wait, your organization is called OMGS?
Mm-hmm.
So is it just weird coincidence that OM, Orgasmic Meditation, is the beginning of your organizational name?
I think that's one of those things.
What is orgasmic meditation?
It's
I don't know.
Orgasmic meditation is sort of it's a movement of people who are trying to study women's orgasm in a context that I would call sort of cultish.
Okay,
It sounds
unusual.
Yeah.
can you tell us anything about cultural differences?
That is a great question. Almost everything that I know is about the United States. I do know that they exist. I was in France after the Paris attacks a few years ago, and the news kept playing this clip over and over of this older woman in a Woman on the Street kind of interview. They were asking people, like, what do you think? What's going to happen now? And she said, like, well, you know what? This is France, so we're just going to keep on being France, and we're going to show the world, we're going to have our great food, and we're going to have our great sex, and, like, damn it, this is France. And I was like, wow, it's not the United States. Yes.
Do you know, like, of any techniques or things that we can do to actually normalize the conversation and start talking about our orgasms with our friends? Or lack of?
Oh, man.
It's not okay.
Straight to the heart.
Yeah.
I said it's not okay.
That's not how to do it.
Yeah, that was it.
By the way, I'm never bringing a partner here.
So I think that's my cue. Good night.
There are a lot of really clever strategies for that that I don't have lined up to say, but what I would say is it really only takes one person to start the conversation, because your friend's not going to be like, what?
I
Alright, maybe I have different friends, but
asked a doctor about
Sorry,
an
I think you're
OBGYN and she wouldn't
Yeah.
talk about it.
yeah.
She was like, oh, it's good to have sex often. I was like, yeah, but I'm asking like other questions. And she was just like, yeah, you know, everything's good down there. I'm like, I know, but yeah, I can count on one hand the amount of times that people have talked about sex. Like,
Oh,
ever.
I talk to my friends about sex all the time.
Yes, me too.
Several of them are in this room. And our coworkers, I can attest. Coworkers do it, exactly.
Things have changed since too.
Can you talk a little bit about the American culture and how we ended up where we are in terms of puritanical organisms? Like, how did this come to be?
We actually did have sex, by the way. The Puritans.
Evidence suggests.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not a history expert, but yeah, I would say that our culture descending from the Puritans and the Victorian era didn't help either. It wasn't that long ago that people were telling their kids that masturbation would make them go blind, and so we have this association of pleasure with bad things, and we think that is shifting right now, that it's just starting to shift, and we want to accelerate that shift. And part of doing that is talking about it. It's hard.
Well, that's
The
I wanted
last
to respond to Victoria. But go ahead. I wanted to answer your maybe provide a perspective on your question, but okay. When for some reason I tend to be a person that I mean I don't know a lot other but some people tend to ask me these things and I'm like I can only give you what I know, and I think in those kind of circumstances, especially if someone asks you or someone brings up something or you're sharing something, just not treating it as something odd, like just treating like you would with anything else, like if a kid asked you something, or just treat it as something like, okay, yeah, this is normal, let's just talk about this. It's not, sometimes it obviously is awesome and fun to share in our collective awkwardness about it and laugh and get that stress out, but sometimes it helps to kind of to not laugh about it or be awkward. I find that sometimes in vulnerable moments when people talk to me about it or whatever, that it's sometimes really helpful to be like, oh yeah, totally, and have a giggle, or to be like, yeah, that seems normal or human and stuff like that. But so I think that was all a lot of just thoughts, but basically to come at it non-judgmentally if someone talks to you about it, and to not treat it like it's weird, even if you feel weird about it, or to share that you feel weird about it and then move past that and be kind of okay, let's just talk about it.
I've actually been
also,
doing that with
this is
anal
what this
stimulation.
website is for.
What?
You're not, pitching your company
yes.
great, but that's literally the purpose of it. It's got different women sharing their story all over it. It's fantastic, and Emma Watson is advertising for it. Yeah, it's a really great tool for bringing this into the conversation. The website's fantastic.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just a quick observation. I've been sitting here for the last 3 presentations, and everybody's been interested, but when this topic came up, this room was glued. You could have a pin drop in here. Everybody.
Canning doesn't do
So
that.
Canning is good, but
I love the fruit metaphor.
I do.
Tying it together.
Recently I went to Good Vibes and I noticed a change. It seems over time, but now there's a ton of broad vibrators, which is really interesting, and that didn't used to be the case quite as much, and granted that's only one store, but I think that's cool, and now that you brought that up, it's oh shit, yeah, they figured that out. They were commercializing it. But what I wanted to ask, are there other things like that? You said this is an unusual one, or this is one that I want to share with you. Are there other things that you could share with us like that?
Oh my god.
I mean, I'm sure the answer is yes.
Yeah.
Are you willing to?
We got to 9:30.
Bed or on?
Yeah. Off the cuff, there is some more information that I could share that I think would be easy and eye-opening. So broadening I actually chose as a topic because it would be easy to convey. It's simple and it doesn't rely on animations. The site has a lot of animations, different ways to do different things, and I didn't want disembodied hands moving over here. But another topic is pairing, which is the idea of adding clitoral stimulation to penetrative sex. So there's some numbers I'm gonna throw out. So a lot of people have heard that the average male timed orgasm is 2 minutes. That was something that the Kinsey Institute published in the 60s, and the women's timed orgasm in the same circumstance was 20 minutes. And people have an idea that women's pleasure is really difficult and mysterious, but we found out that when women masturbate with the goal of having an orgasm, the average time to orgasm is 5 minutes. So that's, is that too long? I don't think so. And so if we're saying that women take too long, the question is too long during what? like men would take a long time to orgasm too if someone was doing some stimulating them in an ineffectual way. Yeah, like that. It's not even So what we found is when people have penetrative sex, when there's like a vagina and something's going in and out, penis or a dildo or whatever, and there's not really anything else going on, aka the traditional definition of sex, about 17% of women orgasm under those circumstances. But if you add clitoral stimulation through, I think it's easier to use a hand or a vibrator, that number jumps to 74%. And it's really easy to do. A lot of people are hesitant to do it because it might be seen as an affront to their partner. Like a woman might be afraid to reach down because like then he'll think that he's not doing a good job, and like my job is to make him think he's doing a good job, and like, so I'll just pretend like I'm having fun. And I think that's not the best way to go. Anecdotally, I think a lot of, I don't have numbers about this, but a lot of partners that we've talked to are really excited by the idea of like exploring together and trying new things, and I don't think it's an affront. It's just reality, and it feels good. So yes.
You said at the beginning that the research that you're doing was only focused on women, and you're slowly branching out to men.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we're not done yet.
Oh, we're definitely not done here.
We're so not done.
We have
Men are, it's
We have a-
2019, men are neglected, didn't you know?
It's about time somebody.
You know, I think it's funny. Okay, it's funny that you say that. First of all, we have a lot of content for women that's like in production. So there's like a big body of content that's going to be coming out. So there's like a lot of discoveries that we've had. But I am going to defend men as being able to benefit from and deserving a resource like this too. So I have recently gone through and like learned the experiences of about 1,000 men and their personal pleasure breakthroughs that they've had, and their breakthroughs were really different than the women's breakthroughs. And like I'll just, as a preview, I would say men have discovered that they love foreplay. They love it. And I'm going to speak in really broad brushes here. It's not true for everyone. Nothing is true for everyone. But they love cuddling. They're giant sweethearts. And they are fighting against a narrative that says, like, oh, like, what's a man supposed to do? Like, what's going on in porn? I just, like, thrust, you know, like, maybe I choke her, and, like, all these things. There's, like, all of these, there's a lot of pressure to emulate what they see in porn. And it's not, for a lot of men, for the men who's shared their stories with me, by and large, that's not actually what they like. So, like, it's funny, like, in the example that I was talking about earlier, where she is pretending to enjoy herself, for, like, in order to, like, support his ego, he also is like, I think this is what is expected of me, like, I'm gonna do this, and, like, to a certain extent, particularly when people are younger, there's a whole performative aspect more so than really exploring together and, like, finding what actually feels good.
Okay.
I would imagine, like you said, that people have a hard time talking to each other about sex and like your friends, but I think it's probably a lot easier for women to talk to each other about sex and what they find pleasurable than for men to talk to each other about what they find pleasurable, would be my guess. I don't know, do you know if that's true?
I don't know if that's true. Anyone?
Anecdotally, yes.
I would just guess like women might be more likely to talk about like how they masturbate than
Women all assume that they're talking about in the locker room, but I'm not sure.
Well, it sounds like that's part of the data you're collecting about if they've shared. That you said before that the women said that they hadn't shared this or that with anybody.
Yeah,
so
yeah. For
that seems like something you could pull out of your data set.
yeah, there's not one master data set for all people. So like we're just getting started for men and we haven't asked questions like that yet. We ask really high level questions.
I mean, you could extrapolate the fact that if men are performing, that they're not going to want to share that they're not performing. Whereas if you're not coming, you can say, yeah, I'm not getting there. My partner isn't getting me there. So there's less like blame on the woman, I guess. I would assume. I mean.
So, with the previous talk, we learned about, nuclear power, that the idea that they wanted to get plutonium, so the funding came from the military.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm kind of curious, who is funding?
Oh yeah.
That's
a great
It's also for plutonium.
So research like this has actually never been done before. Like we're studying this for the first time, and one reason why it's never been done before is this cultural taboo. So can you imagine the government funding research like this or big institutions? It's not going to happen. So the educational website that I described is behind a paywall. People pay a one-time fee for access to the content, and that's what funds all of the research.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So it's people themselves who are asking for this.
Yes.
And wow, that sounds very democratic in a way.
There's not funding from the Kinsey Institute?
No. No, we partner with researchers there, but it's not, they don't fund it.
Interesting.
There's some indications that the younger generations writ large are having less sex than ever. Is there any indication that it is better sex?
I wish I could say yes. I think online porn is having an immense
this is
impact.
researched as well.
I recently read a really long, really wonderful article about it, but I don't remember what the publication was.
And I taught a class of 19-year-olds recently for a friend of mine who's a college professor. He had me come in, he was doing a class on gender, and he had me come in and talk to just the women. So he just wanted to see what would happen if, he was a man, so he couldn't do a class of just women. He wanted a completely female room. And so I was talking to these women about sexuality, and what was shocking to me was the term slut. This goes, round robin to our puritanical and why don't we talk about it. And it's there is no male equivalent of the word slut. But these girls were still really operating. I mean, one of the things that impacts female pleasure is the concept that you're taught not to have pleasure or you're a slut, right? And, what is the safety zone of having a boyfriend? And if you have too many boyfriends per year, are you a slut? So this was still a really predominant, here we were in college in 2000 whatever, and these girls were seriously concerned about their reputation still, and I thought, whoa, that was my mother in 1950, seriously. So I think that impacts pleasure too, of am I supposed to have pleasure? What is the acceptable amount of pleasure?
Yeah.
If I talk to my girlfriends about my last 3 Tinder dates, does she gonna think I'm a slut? This is still a very, I was shocked that this was still a very prevalent thing of what of my sexuality is okay. Where's the line still?
Yeah.
We just had a discussion with my 6th graders and about the origin of slurs and various words that we say to each other that are not okay, and the girls were talking about slut, and they were pissed off that the guys didn't have an equivalent, and then then there was a conversation about, well, it's good to be a slut if you're a guy, and I had a couple of boys who were red-faced and furious that we were saying that it was okay to be a slut as a guy, and they were like, it is absolutely not okay if any of our friends treated women, because they were talking about players, if any of our friends treated women like that, we would think that they're terrible people, and granted they're 11, It was sweet anyway.
Yeah.
And the boys, at least in that group and in front of their teacher, so who knows, were all on that side, like no, you have to treat women, and they're, we weren't talking about orgasms and stuff like that, but it was definitely like a sweet thing.
Okay, we have time for probably 1 or 2 more questions, but since it's the last talk, if you want to take more questions, if there are more questions, we may extend the Q&A, so it's entirely up to
What
you.
time do we
Naomi.
used to go?
That's fine with me. Maybe we could move to a, like, I don't know if everyone wants to be part of the extended Q&A, but yeah.
And you talked about porn very non-judgmentally. I was wondering, do you have an opinion on whether the landscape should be changed, preserved, banned? What's your opinion?
Of porn?
Yeah.
Well, I've observed that it's doing a lot of harm, but I think that I don't think that it's the fault of the medium. I think that it's the medium is a reflection of this weird thing that we have going on in society, where obviously everyone is really interested in this, but no one is talking about it, and everyone hides it and pretends that it's not happening. I was thinking about, there's a lot of food metaphors in this presentation, and sex is imagine if, and sex and masturbation, imagine if we did all of our cooking and eating alone or with one other person in our bedrooms, and and then pretended that we never ate. And we loved watching YouTube videos of people just scarred.
Well, that's not
yeah,
sacred.
that's a thing though.
Yeah.
Metaphor kind of writes itself.
David banned it from YouTube.
Do you, I know that there are indie porn studios and filmmakers and stuff who are really trying to express kinder, more authentic values around sexuality. Do you think there's hope there for growing that side of it? Where do you think that
I do think
fits in?
there's hope. I feel granted, I live in the Bay Area, so I often feel I can't tell what's going on in the rest of the world. But I feel like our culture is, like I said, at the cusp of a change, of a transformation in this area. And I think that porn like that, I hope that that builds. Yeah.
I don't know if you listen to Savage Lovecast or read Dan Savage's column, but he sponsors a independent porn film festival every year called Hump. And so
Oh, they
it
have it
tours.
here.
Yeah. So that's kind of the start. And I feel more of those could spread and promote a more broad definition and independently made, and I would imagine more reflective of reality.
But it is doing some weird things to the younger people who haven't had a breadth of experience yet, of the isolation of it and the lack of socialization.
Well,
of
the
it.
first foray into sexuality can be something totally out of left field. It's not Playboy anymore.
Right.
It's I would be surprised at a lot of them, I'm sure.
Yeah, and it we learn through repetition, and porn, it paints an idea of what is normal in the mind.
Right.
And one thing that is really tough to get around in porn, even porn with the best intentions, is that the positions and activities depicted they have to be chosen for the camera angle as a priority over pleasure, and so that's just one constraint that they have to deal with. That means that if people are replicating what they see in porn, which is I think most young people's default when they're becoming sexual, then they'll be missing out on a lot.
They're doing it's designed for an audience, and that makes it not a present.
It's inherently opposite of what is
Yeah.
important, which is communicating and connecting. It's about what's showing on the outside versus what's actually.
Who's watching you, like
I
what
would-
you're supposed to look like, yeah.
I would say that to movies in general, not just porn.
Yeah, movies too.
Because everybody lives their life trying to imitate their favorite
Yeah.
movies, whether it's porn or not.
Yeah, you could
Right.
use more communication.
Yes.
Yes.
I used to teach sex ed in high schools, and I will say that one of the advantages of things like the Crash Pad series, which are showing different types of bodies, right? Larger bodies, smaller bodies, people who are trans, gender nonconforming, is that it does create opportunities for people to realize, oh, there's something beyond what we see in like traditional straight porn, which is really valuable in terms of confidence, body image, that kind of thing. And then the other comment I wanted to make is, because I also used to work at Good Vibrations, is that the Antique Vibrator Museum is a really wonderful resource. You can learn about hysteria and more about some of the roots of this entire movement, and that there's a lot of material out there in terms of what you can say to your friends. If you ever call like the San Francisco Sex Information Line, we train a lot of teachers to talk about sexual health in a way that is as inclusive as possible. And when we're teaching people how to respond to questions from like, my penis is really small, I don't know what to do, or it's gonna be my first time, we have a very specific model that we use, starting off with giving permission as the very first thing. So being that non-judgmental person, and I would encourage people to practice that in their daily lives.
A tiny one-off comment, you just reminded me, back from like college, taking psychology of sexuality as part of my major. One of the statistics they mentioned is less than 50% of couples use lube. I don't know if that's still true or that's reflective of your research, but that was shocking at the time, to the point where my professor made it a habit of every test, she would have people write for 1 extra credit point a little mantra at the top of the test, which I will share with you, which was never have sex with a dry vagina, whether it is yours or you're just visiting. So between that and that statistic, do with that what you will, but I figured I should just drop it out here.
Getting all kinds of tips.
I had one last question for you. How did you go from studying trees
Oh my
to,
god.
I mean, there is a plant
Yeah.
on your presentation, granted, but that seems to be a leap.
It must be fun to go to cocktail parties and say, well, what I do is...
Oh man. Sometimes it's fun. So, that's a great question. I ask myself that sometimes. I basically I got very lucky. I happen to know the founder of OMGS. He lived in the same college co-op that I did. We didn't live there at the same time, but I met him back in 2004 when he came to visit. And like, we weren't friends or anything. I'd never like hung out one-on-one. But he was over at my house one time visiting someone else. It was just like an acquaintance, someone who's kind of around. And he told me that they were having a hard time filling this position. And they'd been through 30 people. That it was the sort of thing where they gave a test. It was like, here's the work, like what can you do? And I wasn't working at the time, and I did the work, and I sent it in, and when he saw it, he was like, who did this? Who did this? And I thought, oh, it's bad. I did it. And he was like, this is amazing. So that's what happened.
Cool. So did you ever work with trees?
Yes. And I love trees very much. And I teach tree classes in Point Reyes, and that's makes me very happy.
Any other questions?
Tree questions?
Awesome. Thank you so much.